The Big Show returns after 5 hip surgeries.
What an amazing surprise for all of us here at Oklahoma City on Monday Night Raw.
Hey everybody, Dr. Chris, orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician. Welcome to my channel where I make orthopedics and sports medicine easy to understand for everyone.
Okay.
If you want to know more about my life as an orthopedic surgeon, be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Stable Knees. And I'm also on TikTok, Dr.Chris Raynor. You guys really seem to be digging this wrestling content, so I thought I'd give you more of the same today. And today's topic is The Big Show, and more specifically, why it took him 2 years and 5 surgeries to return to the WWE. So recently, after a delay of almost 2 years, The Big Show returned to the world of professional wrestling. He had been forced to leave professional wrestling after having suffered an injury to his left hip. The Big Show was injured on September 4th of 2017 in a steel cage match versus Braun Strowman, the monster among men. The Big Show was slammed out of the cage by Strowman. And when I say that the Big Show was slammed, I mean all 7 feet, 383 pounds of him was slammed out of the cage. He landed on his left hip when the cage struck the floor. He required assistance from 2 referees to leave the arena. The Big Show stated in an interview with WWE.com that he initially heard a snap in his left hip when he jumped off the top rope to perform a flying elbow. Later in the match, after receiving a power slam from Strowman, the Big Show stated that he felt his pelvis drive into the mat, which sucked all, and I do mean all, of the energy completely out of him. He went on to state that when Strowman threw him out of the ring, he knew that something was wrong with his hip. With his adrenaline flowing and not wanting to make a scene in front of all the fans, he managed to soldier on and he hobbled backstage. At that point, he was having extreme difficulty putting weight on his left leg and foot. It appears that this injury had been scripted to allow time off to have surgery on his left hip. 2 weeks after his injury, The Big Show underwent a hip resurfacing operation that was performed by Dr. Edwin Sue of the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. Dr. Sue specializes in hip resurfacing and anterior approach surgery. He also specializes in hip arthritis in young active patients. Given this information, I will assume that The Big Show underwent a hip resurfacing operation that was performed by an anterior approach. A hip resurfacing is a special type of hip implant for active patients that preserves bone stock and allows impact activities after implantation.
So we decided on something called hip resurfacing.
The preoperative x-rays shown by Dr. Sue revealed the amount of osteoarthritis that was present prior to his operation. Years of grinding in the ring had finally taken their toll.
I think this is just years of constant grinding and working. I mean, I work in an impact environment.
And if we look at the x-rays on the screen, we can see that there is a complete loss of joint space. And this just means that all of the cartilage in the joint on both the femoral side and the acetabular side had been worn away by years of abuse in the ring. After 4 long years, the pain was gone. 5 weeks after that appointment, he stated that things were still progressing well. Typically, after this type of surgery, rehabilitation will continue for a period of approximately 3 months, after which time most people are able to get back to their day-to-day non-impact activities. Those with very physical jobs, on the other hand, may rehabilitate longer before returning to their jobs and their very physical tasks. In April of 2018, The Big Show announced that he would be returning to wrestling shortly and that he had just signed a 3-year extension with the WWE. The Big Show finally returned to wrestling on October 9th of 2018 on SmackDown Live in a match versus Randy Orton. Unfortunately, The Big Show was defeated in this match by Orton. He wrestled a few times after returning, but left the game on November 27th of 2018 after tweaking his hamstring. This injury left him sidelined for some time as he did not return for over 1 year. The Big Show finally returned for a second time on January 6th of 2020 as a surprise partner for Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe on Monday Night Raw. In an interview after this match, The Big Show stated that he had undergone 5. Yes, 5 freaking surgeries in the year and a half prior to his return. Which leads us to the question, why the heck did he undergo 5 freaking surgeries? That's a lot. On the same freaking hip. Sometime after his initial surgery, he began to spike a fever. This is a bad sign for somebody with a prosthetic or an artificial joint. Bacteria love metal surfaces and non-living things, and a prosthetic joint or an artificial joint fits the bill on both of those. After some investigative tests, doctors determined that the Big Show had suffered a prosthetic joint infection or an infection of his hip resurfacing implant. This is a bad problem because the infection could potentially jump from the implant to the surrounding bone, causing a condition called osteomyelitis or an infection of the bone. Unfortunately for the Big Show, he required another surgery. Surgery number 2. He underwent an aggressive I&D or irrigation and debridement to wash the bacteria out of his joint and to hopefully preserve his hip resurfacing implant. He also had a PICC line inserted for the administration of intravenous antibiotics. A PICC line is a special type of intravenous line that can be left in for extended periods of time without risk of the line itself becoming infected. After his initial washout, the Big Show received a course of 7 weeks of antibiotic therapy through the PICC line. We can assume that the infection was quite aggressive since he was treated with several different antibiotics during this course of therapy. At this point in time, he was anticipating a 6 to 8 month recovery from his infection and following surgery. After his antibiotic treatment, the PICC line was removed on January 2nd of 2019. The Big Show did not return to wrestling for over a year after that, and an additional 3 surgeries. We've only covered 2. You mean there's more? Oh boy. In an ESPN interview in January of 2020, the Big Show states that he probably would have been better off in the long run if he had just gone with a standard hip replacement in the very first place. This statement suggests that at least one of his surgeries was a revision hip arthroplasty where his hip resurfacing was converted to a total hip replacement or a standard hip replacement implant. And this is the type of implant that it appears that he has now. Initially, it had been the Big Show's hope to avoid this type of implant over fears that it might limit the type of activity with which he could be engaged. Although they deal with arthritis and pain very well, standard total hip replacement implants carry with them a number of significant risks. Those risks include dislocation of the implant, periprosthetic fractures or fractures around the implants, premature wear in very heavy or very active patients, and finally, catastrophic failure of the implant with some alternate bearing surfaces. And all of this just means that there is a lot that can go wrong with a standard implant if you are too rough with them. Let me tell you, 7 feet and 383 pounds launching itself off the top rope to do a flying elbow is way too freaking rough. Jumping off the top rope, like, does this guy even know who Sid Vicious is? Has he even seen that video before?
Now Sid Vicious up on top.
Oh, that is so difficult.
Look at the left foot.
I suspect that the other 2 surgeries included, number 1, another I&D, which likely failed, and number 2, the first stage of a 2-stage revision where the infected arthroplasty implant was removed and replaced by a temporary antibiotic implant. The second stage of a 2-stage revision where the temporary component is removed and replaced by a permanent implant is likely the last of the 5 surgeries that were performed on the Big Show. The second stage of a 2-stage revision is typically performed after tests have confirmed eradication of the infection from the joint. A single-stage revision, on the other hand, involves removal of the implant, aggressive irrigation and debridement of the joint, and replacement with a permanent non-infected implant, all in a single stage. Although both are viable options, a two-stage revision is the safer option if an aggressive infection is present in the joint. So now that we know why the Big Show underwent 5 freaking surgeries, what happens next? Given his age and his activity level, the Big Show will likely have a hip replacement that uses alternate bearing surfaces that prolong the life of the implant. This may include a vitamin E treated irradiated plastic liner and a ceramic head. It may also include a dual mobility cup to improve stability of the hip. Either way, his wrestling style will need to change if the Big Show wants to preserve his new hip replacement for as long as possible and to avoid operation number 6 for as long as he can. He certainly won't, or at least he shouldn't, be jumping off the top rope if he wants to stay out of the operating room for as long a period as possible. If all goes well and according to plan, he should be able to get at least 10 to 15, if not more, years out of his hip replacement. And ultimately, I wish the Big Show well on his return to professional wrestling. What do you think about the Big Show's return? Do you think that he should have come back to professional wrestling? Be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.
Just a flesh wound.